Hey guys, Rich from Richmond Gaming. Hope everyone is doing fantastically well. We are now into our third video of our How to Play series. This time we're going to be tackling the Wakanda affiliation, joined once again by Quinn. Quinn, how are you doing?
I'm all right.
Excellent. So Quinn, it's fair to say it was quite a difference in play style, wasn't it, when the Wakandans were released? They're the third affiliation that we saw in Marvel Crisis Protocol, but very, very different to either the Cabal or to the Avengers.
Yeah, definitely. They lean a lot more heavily into the control aspect of the game.
Yes, and we'll see that throughout not only the cards from the core characters, but cards and abilities from some of the characters that we take along as well. So let's start then, as we always like to do with these, with the leader himself, Black Panther, aka T'Challa, and his leadership ability, which is King of Wakanda, which is after an allied character rolls attack, defense, or dodge dice, it may spend 1 power. If it does, that character may re-roll one of the dice in that roll. It's a pretty strong leadership ability, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's no winging it, the hallmark best leadership in the game, but, it is up there.
It's definitely up there. It's definitely up there. And then talk about Black Panther himself. We spoke about Steve in the Avengers having one of the best leadership abilities in the game, but unfortunately wrapped around not a very good fourth rank leader. T'Challa's a bit different, isn't he?
Yeah, T'Challa, I mean, so obviously we brought him in the actual Avengers video. He is an Avenger. Being a leader that gets taken outside of affiliation is usually a good sign.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So let's have a look then at the rest of the lineup because it's a very small affiliation. Actually, I think it's joint smallest along with the Black Order only having 5 members who are affiliated. So we've obviously got Black Panther, aka T'Challa. We can also bring along Killmonger, Okoye, Shuri, and Storm. We'll see across these characters a theme here, won't we, where we often talk, Quinn, about how characters fall into one of 3 categories. They're either control, support, or aggressive characters. And yes, a character can do more than one thing, but they tend to have one particular trait. And I think if we look in, especially at Okoye and Shuri, we'll see 2 characters there who are most definitely in the control and support category.
Yep, definitely.
So out of those 5 then, Quinn, we spoke about how, typically we're going to be taking 3 or 4 characters who act as the core of our squad. So they're not only in our roster, but they're in almost every squad that we put together. Obviously, Black Panther's taking up one of those spots. Who of the other 4 do you think gets a place in that initial core character list?
I mean, it almost definitely has to be Shuri and Okoye to make a 9-threat core of 3 characters. It's too good to pass up. Like, they're all good characters in and of themselves, and being affiliated for such a low threat is really valuable.
Yeah, because I think at that point, as you say, you're affiliated for only 9 threat. Now, which in the most part is really good. However, one of the things that the Wakandans do struggle with a little bit is if you do get put into some of those higher threat scenarios, you are then forced, aren't you, to take a 4th character from affiliation just to make sure that you are still within or still over that 51% threshold.
Yeah, they don't have the breadth of variety that other factions have, which is a downside, but their characters tend to be decent.
Their characters are pretty strong, yeah. I would also include Killmonger, not necessarily in a core squad list. He's definitely not going to make my squad every single time, but he's most definitely a character I'm going to take with me in my roster. I think you want that 4th Wakandan just to make sure that you can hit those higher threat crises without having to take then rogue agents. I'm not a big fan of taking rogue agents in, or at least relying on them. And he also comes with a very nice tactics card that we covered in the Cabal video. Anytime we can score victory points outside of the cleanup phase, for me, is always a good thing. Storm. Shall we talk about Storm?
I mean, if you want to be sad for like 2 minutes, sure.
And we'll cover this off towards the latter part of the video, but I think there's a place for Storm, but I would say not in a pure Wakanda list. I think if all you're doing is intending on playing Wakanda, there isn't a place for Storm. There is potentially a place for Storm if you are going dual affiliation, but I think we'll cover that off later in the video. So a core list then of Black Panther, Okoye, and Shuri, but then Killmonger in your roster to give you that flexibility to be able to flex up and down on the crisis level depending on what you're playing at.
Yeah.
Quinn, so on to non-affiliated characters, and I want to start with three, I would definitely call them big heavy hitters, all 5-threat characters, all bring something very, very different to the game, all fill a gap that the Wakandans most definitely need filling. And I want to start with the big, ugly-headed George Tarleton himself, MODOK, because he works quite well within the Wakanda affiliation, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, so there are two things that MODOK really brings. He brings a great deal of offense, especially when you consider that he brings in a mystic attack, which is something that a lot of affiliations are lacking, but Wakanda in particular have no in-affiliation access. The other thing he brings is more control, because Wakanda is a control faction most of the time. You can build it to be killy, but yeah, with Bow to the Will of MODOK, he's very good at dominating those narrow crises like Gamma and Demons, and just sending people on their way.
Yeah, he also has that throw as well. And, whilst we're not building a killy list, we are seeing more and more mystic attack as we got the Convocation Wave. And typically those big hitters with high mystic attacks, they have a huge, big, high mystic defense, but they are lacking in those physical defenses. And that's a really nice way to be able to take some of those characters out without having to use an action for it as well. I also like the fact that yes, MODOK has his own rerolls, but if somebody else can pay for those rerolls on MODOK and you keep his power for more Doomsday Chairs or more bows or more imbeciles, I think that's quite a nice thing to be able to do as well.
Yeah, definitely.
MODOK also brings a couple of really nice tactics cards. One very nice, one that I would say is good in Aim Lackeys and Psychic Fortress. Now, we spoke about these before, but I also think that if you're bringing MODOK along, you probably want to bring at least one, potentially two of these tactics cards as well.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on how slots end up looking towards the end of roster creation. But if you've got slots spare and you're looking for something that's a bit better than a generic unaffiliated, some of those are incredibly good. I would definitely recommend having a look at MODOK's character-specific cards.
Yeah, definitely. So the next heavy hitter sort of 5-threat I want to talk through then is Scarlet Witch. We know from our videos that we've done previously together, we're both in agreement that she is one of the best 5-threat characters in the game, as is MODOK. There's a reason why she fits in almost any affiliated list. But again, she brings some really heavy-hitting mystic attacks that the Wakandans are really missing out on, don't they?
Yeah, namely, she's very good at the condition game with that chaos magic.
Yeah, which you could say is also a form of control as well, couldn't you? Being able to dish out those hex, incinerate, and poison to a lesser extent, I would say, but definitely bleed as well is a nice way of being able to increase the potential damage output from some of your own characters, or with a hex, for example, reducing the amount of damage that a character can dish out.
Yeah, also, she makes very good use of rerolls from upgrades in King of Wakanda because of Chosen of Chthon, she has more dice faces that are beneficial to her whenever she rolls. So rerolls are more valuable because they're more likely to be good.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Once again, she brings a couple of tactics cards. I think we've been in agreement that both of them are good. One of them is, I would say, very good. So we've got No More Mutants, which again, another form of control. Being able to stop your opponent to make that big, big play can be almost a turning point in the game, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. The only issue I have with cards like this is I always forget to use them because I'm a very proactive player. I don't like sitting there and going, "Ooh, you do this, aha!" Because
I think that's
I'll
probably
forget.
more on you, Quinn, than the card itself.
Yeah,
But one
I
that
mean,
we
I said I didn't say card was bad.
Yeah, one that we both agree on though is very good and I think works really well in Wakanda is the Whims of Chaos.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. Being able to heal allies and remove conditions from them is great. But where I think it really shines, and this is speaking as a player that favors attrition, is just paying, however many power you need, because Wanda usually has it, to just go, okay, all of those enemies within 3 are now on fire, which means I can kill them. without even having to activate Wanda, which means
Yeah.
I can hold her in reserve to terrify you later in the round.
And that's the key thing with all of these cards, is that whether it be Modocs or Scarlet Witches, they don't have to be their. It doesn't have to be their activation to be able to play any of those cards, does it? They're all cards that they can play out of activation.
Yeah.
So the last big hitter then that I want to go through that I think sits really well in Wakanda, and that is Angela, kind of the sort of more physical version of Wanda, if you will, but also plays a really good game from an extraction perspective.
Yep. So because of it being a 50 mil base character with a long move, that means that she can get to within range 1 of midline extract, which is really potent. There's only one other model that can do that at the moment, aside from outside influences. Cough, bump in the night, cough. Which is Amazing Spider-Man. But yeah, Angela's absolutely brilliant because she can sort of switch what she's doing like immediately. You know, she can be in the middle of a fight, you know, carving people up, going after those weaker, lower threat units that are easier to daze for Angelic Assassin. Or, you know, she can be loping across the battlefield, just gathering up objectives and keeping them away from your opponent.
Yeah, and I think once you've got an objective on her as well, she's very difficult to take down. 6 stamina, which isn't amazing on a 5 threat character, it's okay, but 4s across the board means that she's not susceptible really to any one particular type of attack. And the fact that she's got the rerolls potentially from Shuri and from King of Wakanda, plus then the living ribbons that stops your opponent being able to modify their dice when they're attacking you. She's actually significantly tankier than she looks on at first glance, isn't she?
Yeah, she is.
And once again, a throw, right? So, you know, we said that being able to throw terrain is really nice. I think it's a size 4 throw
Yeah,
on
size
Angela.
4, range 2. It's really beneficial for Wakanda as well because they only have one in affiliation thrower, and that is Storm, who, I mean,
We've already
you,
covered off. You're probably not going to be
you
taking
saw
her.
our warm reception of her, so should tell you enough.
Absolutely. So on to some 4 threat characters next, and I think there's 4 that I want to go through that we've agreed all fit quite nicely. And we're kind of, there's a theme here of sticking with the girls. So let's go with Enchantress, aka Amora, first. We've covered off in previous videos how good she is. She just slots into that Wakanda roster so easily, doesn't she?
Yeah, she's absolutely brilliant. Effectively, she's a 4 threat Modoc, which, yeah,
It's not a bad thing.
sounds great to me.
With a beam as well.
With a beam that automatically generates 1 power and can sap more power, which means that if you're not really spoiling to try and gain power, she can just burn all of it on re-rolling a single die for each of those attacks with King of Wakanda,
Yeah.
because she's gaining the power back anyway, regardless.
Exactly. Amora's Kiss, one of her strongest superpowers, I would say.
Yeah,
Activate her last. You can even use other characters to bring enemies closer towards her, can't you? And spending 3 power to make them drop whatever it is that they're holding and automatically put it onto Enchantress anyway. So I always see it as like it's like you're almost getting 1 power back off that, right? Because
yeah,
to interact, you'd pay a power anyway. So really, in my head, it's only a 2 cost thing. Super way of being able to grab those victory points towards the end of a round.
yeah. And she's always swimming with power as well, because in addition to the really good beam power generation, she's an Asgardian, which means 2 power a turn,
She
because
is
why
an
not?
Asgardian as well. Siren's Call is also extremely powerful, being able to advance, especially on those scenarios where people need to be on the point, especially on those scenarios, Gamma Wave, one that I really do like playing with the Wakandans on, moving people two away from the objectives just means they're going to take extra damage.
Yeah.
So second of the 4 threats then, Medusa. So some control with her, but she's really going to dish out that damage for you as well, isn't she? Especially with the rerolls that she's going to be getting.
Yeah, she's an absolute monster in combat. Braid Bash is easily one of the best builder attacks in the game.
Yeah, well, and also the being inhuman means she gets one reroll anyway. King of
Yep.
Wakanda means that she gets another. Plus,
Yep.
then she can use the Shuri rerolls as well. So the chance of getting that flurry is pretty high.
Yeah, now obviously you have to decide to do King of Wakanda and upgrades before you get to do your Inhuman reroll
That's
because of
true.
the timing, which makes it a little worse. But if you've got sort of a subpar roll and you're just trying to fish for that flurry, maybe you get a point of damage in for the push. I think it's usually worth paying for it every time because if you're getting damage through, you're getting power back.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And she does have some other things that she can spend the money on. Hair flip is obviously whilst it's a throw, and it's a throw of an enemy character, which is one thing that I believe the Wakandans don't have themselves, do they?
Storm has one yet again, but I mean, Storm is
Sorry,
Storm.
in my
So
head, she wasn't in my roster, so. So yeah, another super offensive choice. She also have the living strands, which works in I think a similar way, doesn't it? Where opponents can't reroll or change their attack dice when they're attacking her as well.
yeah, which once again, absolutely brilliant. It makes Magneto cry, which I'm not fond of.
He really doesn't like that. He prefers to throw things at her than attack her.
Yeah,
One of the newer characters, then, and I'll let you go more in depth on Mr. Jericho Drum because he's one of your favourites, but Doctor
he is.
Voodoo.
Yeah, Doctor Voodoo. Oh man, I love him. Yeah, so Doctor Voodoo is absolutely brilliant in a lot of places, but especially Wakanda. He brings mystic attacks, which is something I've already mentioned that they're lacking in. He's got a character throw, size two, and it costs three, but he's actually got quite good power generation between his builder having sap and also uh, being able to gain power for rolling skulls, just like Shuri does. So yeah, I mean, he's absolutely brilliant for just walking onto a point and throwing someone off it to help you with that control game. He can help you murder if you need to. Staff of Lagba is absolutely brilliant for that with the power burn. Makes great use of the rerolls because if he gets wild, people are losing power, which is always a good thing. Also, in sort of tighter situations where you need to just eke out the end of a game, possession is absolutely brilliant on sort of those lower threat characters that will be those stragglers that will be hanging around whilst you're trying to deal with your opponent's bigger threat. Just being able to turn one of those off in terms of like holding objectives and carrying them as well is absolutely debilitating.
Yeah, I would agree with pretty much everything you said there, Quinn. Like I say, it's a character you've definitely had more experience with than me, but I think he definitely brings a lot of things that not only synergize with Wakanda, but definitely filling some of those gaps. Particularly in the Mystic attack side, but also on some of that support side as well, and a bit of control in there as well. With, like you say, with possession, if you do want to, stop, especially if you built it up and you're against a Magneto or a Thanos or a Dormammu, someone who's picked up a couple of hammers, for example. What a fantastic way of being able to completely debilitate that character and stop them from being able to score those victory points.
Yeah, and even if you're not doing that, just being able to stand there with 4/4/6 defenses can be
It's
really
quite nice
strong.
for a four threat character. Yeah, that's
Yep,
pretty strong.
6/6 stamina as well. Absolutely brilliant.
On to one of my favourite four threats then, and he makes my Brotherhood roster 9 times out of 10. Vision.
Yeah, the vision is absolutely brilliant in this roster.
Yeah, he's obviously got the solar beam, solar energy beam. So it's almost identical to Enchantress's, but obviously it's a range 4 rather
Yeah,
than a range 3. So just making it that much better. It's still
which
a
for a
sap.
beam is very important.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But still has the sap and still gains power after each attack is resolved, which means, as you say, you can fish for the extra wilds or the hits or anything using King of Wakanda without even having to worry about the power cost.
Yep, absolutely brutal.
Calculated trajectory, it's another enemy character throw, but it's size 3. And let's not underestimate, how important that size 3 is, because there are not too many characters that are 4 or bigger, are they? If you've got a size 3, you're then able to throw a good sort of 90% of characters that
Yeah,
we've got in the
that's
game.
throwing, your Kingpins, your Thanoses, your She-Hulks. Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. Also can throw terrain, which is nice if you need to eke out that little bit of damage.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, either throwing the terrain or throwing an enemy. I'm a fan of throwing enemies into enemies. I'd really like it if Magneto could do that, but hey ho. Synthesis is always good because if he is sat on a back point, at least he can generate some extra power and do something with it. But also as an objective holder, that rapid phase coupled with his phasing, plus his immunity to bleed, makes him quite a strong objective holder as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, he's absolutely brilliant. Also, yeah, just enhanced density, meaning that he can't be pushed, is so good, especially in a mirror match between yourself and another Wakanda player, because it negates a lot of the control that they'll be bringing.
So on to the three threat characters, and sticking with another Asgardian then, not the Visions and Asgardian, but we've had two already. Valkyrie. So
Mm.
once again, we spoke about her before at length, but she's just an all round very very good 3-pointer, isn't she? You're going to struggle to find much better than her that'll just slot into any roster.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own opinions on who the best three threat is, but Valkyrie is easily in the upper echelons. Being an Asgardian, she generates 2 power around, which combined with the cost of Asgardian might being 2 as well, means that she can always walk up and throw a character turn 1, which in the control matchup where you're trying to outscore your opponent quite quickly before they can get their attrition value in, can be really, really powerful.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. If you want to be more aggressive, you can charge, but usually double move throw is the best option.
So, Quinn, on to the first of our two spider people, shall we say, Gwen Stacy. She brings, well, first of all, she's again a really good all rounder 3-threat character, isn't she?
Yeah, she's absolutely brilliant. She's a of the sort of three categories, she definitely leans quite heavily into control and support, but she can have a surprising amount of output. When you double tap someone with spider technique, suddenly you're going from a 4 dice builder to a 7 dice builder, which can be really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, you get that advance, that long advance even off the back end of the attack if you've moved once before already.
Yeah, she's absolutely brilliant. Also, if you have the power, you can freestyle beat down someone first, then spider technique, and your
Yep.
spider technique will be at the 7 dice because it doesn't specify you have to target them with a spider technique, just an attack.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be that one. Webline is super powerful as well.
Yep.
Being able to push an enemy character towards them again. As long as the positioning's right, you can be taking them off points as well. And that one can be used multiple times per turn as well, can't it?
Yeah, so I mean, much like Bow from Enchantress of Modoc, you can use this to pull a bunch of people around, massively displace the enemy team, and just generally wreak havoc.
So the second of our spider people, then spider people, is that the right term? I'm not sure.
Spider persons,
Spider
people,
people, I don't know.
people. We're going with people.
So Miles Morales, so he's the leader or one of the leaders of the Web Warriors, but he also brings some nice control into the mix as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, his control is a lot more extract based than Gwen's or any of the others we mentioned so far, apart from maybe Enchantress.
Enchantress, yeah, she
Um,
has the superpower.
yeah, having stealth is really nice for matchups, just because it limits the amount of targets your opponent has, which might lead them to make subpar decisions in terms of attacks. But yeah, the big thing on Miles's card here is his 3 cost spender Venom Blast.
Yeah, absolutely. I also do like Webline Kick as well. It's only a 4, it's only a 4 strength, but you do get that throw on a size 3
Yeah,
if you roll
if
the
you
wild.
that wild, which I mean, Wakanda's the affiliation to do that in, then yeah, it is
Yeah,
really good.
yeah. He also gets his own rerolls, doesn't he, as well against energy or physical
Yeah,
defense. I think on dodges as well. Yeah, dodges as well, which is quite nice. So again, it makes him considerably more more tanky. One of the absolute powerhouses in the 3-threat category,
Yeah.
or at least I think so anyway, I'm sure
I
you
mean,
agree.
if you want a
Domino.
character with output, you've got a character with output.
Yeah, Domino, super, super strong. And, dishing out a huge number of conditions. Incinerate for a 1 cost is almost worth it itself. Somebody was to say to you, pay 1 power and give them Incinerate. I
Yeah.
think that in itself is almost worth it. But the fact that it ignores, grenade bounds, ignores line of sight, they can't benefit from cover. It's got explosive on there as well, again on a wild, so it's the best affiliation to try and eke out that extra explosive.
Yeah.
But then probability manipulation, things tend to go my way. She's just got so much in her arsenal,
Yeah.
hasn't it, that she can bring.
She really stacks the deck in terms of dice, which, I mean, I know that's mixing my metaphors, but we'll go with it. Also, access to rerolls can be really important with Domino, because she needs a hit to get the rapid fire trigger, and yet you really want to be hitting that every time you attack with her. And it's just
Absolutely.
absolutely heartbreaking when you don't.
It is, but once again, it feels like you're not having to pay for that hit as well, doesn't it? Because you're going to get that power back
Yeah, you're
once your
doing
attack's
damage, you're getting
resolved.
power back. Yeah.
Yeah. Onto one of the newer characters then, and another one of the new convocation characters, Clear.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of debate going round, isn't there, with Clear about how much we're going to see her played out of affiliation. But I actually think one of the affiliations where we could see her played quite a bit is going to be Wakanda, because she relies a lot on certain triggers, doesn't she? From whether it's the Claws of Denak or the Icy Tendrils, you need those triggers to be able to dish out those conditions, and having rerolls is always going to make that easier.
Yeah, I mean, she's always gonna benefit from that. Also, she's got great power generation with Descendant of the Faultine, which means, if you've got sort of a dead turn with her, she can still gain power for later turns. Range 4 on her spender is really nice for her, holding a back point, just being able to shoot forward. Also, repositions for not only your own team but the enemy team in the form of Oshta's Mighty Hand being a size 2 throw is really good.
Yeah. Yeah, range 3 as well, which is quite nice. That's one of the benefits of these mystic characters, isn't it? They tend to have that range 3 rather than a range 2. Only short, but still, that's, short is good enough to get somebody off the point. And yeah, as you say, the Vapors of Dormammu, being able to place a Killmonger further up the board or a Murdoch into place or something like
Yeah,
that is
or
really
like
good.
pull a Shuri out of danger as well. I think is
Yeah,
a nice thing for it.
yeah.
There are loads of applications that you'll find throughout the course of the game.
Yeah, and let's not underestimate the value of being immune to incinerate.
Yeah, it means her defenses are static aside from things like bitter rivals. But I mean, her defenses aren't great in the first place. But it just means that you never get to a situation where you're rolling 1 die.
Yeah. And then the last of our 3 threats, and this is one of your favourites to put in here, isn't it? But
Yeah.
another newer character, Captain America. But before everyone starts shouting at us, this is the Sam Wilson version of Captain America. So Quinn, why do you think he fits really well within the Wakanda?
I mean, looking at his card right now, you can see a rather big box of text, sort of near the middle, which is Shield Throw, his builder attack, and it's really, really good in terms of like control. He's sort of like a pseudo Shuri. He's not anywhere near her level of control because she ignores size restrictions, but he brings other things to the table as well. So range 4, 4 dice, gain power guaranteed, no line of sight or cover. If you do damage, push a character that's size 2 short, and also if you get a wild, you ricochet into someone else, potentially push them as well. There are just so many things in that attack that Wakanda loves, and Sam loves being with Wakanda because he likes getting wild for ricochet.
Yeah, and as you said, the potential to displace up to like 4 characters in a single activation is extremely strong. And yes, there is some dice dependencies in there, as you mentioned with Shuri. It's range 5, it's guaranteed. I mean, it can only ever do 1 damage anyway, so it's not a an attack that's meant to do damage. But with shield throw, yes, you need some triggers, yes, you need to do damage, but again, that's why it leans really nicely into the Wakanda affiliation, doesn't it? Particularly with
Yep.
Shuri alongside him as well, so that he can utilize her rerolls as well. Lastly, then, and I've only put a single 2-threat in here. I'm sure there are others that you could probably argue work well, but I've gone with Toad as a second 2-threat option. For me, Tongue Lash, again with that push, is another form of control. And again, it's only 4 strength, but with the rerolls, you're more than likely going to be able to get that off with the 4 dice. Spit Acid, also dishing out that Incinerate special condition, is really, really useful. But for me, it's that flexibility he brings by being able to interact from range 2 rather than the typical range 1. And he is very slippery, isn't he? We know I've got a superpower called that, but he's a very, very mobile character as well.
Yeah, also for a 2-threat, he's very, very front-loaded, which is how you usually prefer a character to be, because they're better at contesting objectives when they're healthy. Yeah, I was going to use the term shores up, but I don't think that's quite right. Wakanda, as an affiliation, are very good at playing on secures. Toad helps you play the extract game really well as well. Wakanda are no worse at the extract game than most other affiliations, but this makes you better and therefore gives you a real strong scenario presence.
Yeah, I also don't mind the finders keepers as well.
Yeah,
Being able to move something to him,
yeah, like
and as
grabbing that off someone that's about to go
running,
down can
yeah,
be really
running him
fun.
to the side of the board and just ticking over those VPs, however many
Yeah,
it is per turn as well, is really powerful. On to tactics cards, which we know is a really, really important part of any affiliation's roster. We have 2 in affiliation tactics cards, and I want to start with Vibranium Shielding. So when this enemy character would suffer damage from an enemy effect, reduce the amount suffered by 1 to a minimum of 1. And the way that this is played is Black Panther or Shuri may spend X amount of power. So it's got to be at least 1 and no more than 5. And then this round, this character and allied characters, whilst they are within X of this character, gain the invulnerability innate superpower. So it essentially creates an aura, doesn't it, equal to
yeah,
the number of power spent, and you just get the reduced damage by 1 ability.
yeah.
I'm
It's an
not
interesting card. It can help you sort of tank out a little bit, but I think, as you were about to mention, it usually doesn't see play over other cards.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan. I think there's maybe some unique scenarios. Gamma Shelter's one that I'm thinking off of the top of my head, where everybody is always clumped up. But even then, you know, this over a Bitter Rivals, Bitter Rivals feels a lot better
Yep.
in that scenario. However, their other affiliated card, arguably one of, if not the best, tactics card in the game for an affiliation.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So, Wakanda Forever. Any number of allied Wakanda characters may spend 1 power to play this card. Each character that spent power may immediately perform an attack with a cost of 0. Now, the key things here are it is only Wakandan characters. So, even if you take out of affiliation characters, MODOK, Scarlet Witch, Angela, they're not going to be able to use any of their 0 cost
Yeah,
abilities.
thankfully, because otherwise, yeah,
Absolutely. And so any of your affiliate characters, but it's so good, right? Like out of activation attacks. We talk about how good out of activation movement is, but out of activation attacks is super powerful, right?
yeah, it's so good. Like when your opponent, when you failed to kill something your opponent was really hoping would stay alive, and they sort of leave them for a bit, think they're safe, and then you just go, "Oh no, Wakanda forever! That character's actually dead now." Ha!
Yeah, and I think it also works really nicely if you are playing one of the other cards that I think is super powerful in the Wakandans or with Killmonger Usurp the Throne, because it actually triggers Killmonger's focused on the kill, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you're doing it on his turn, then yeah, it's really strong.
Yeah, so for me, Wakanda Forever is, there's no doubt in my mind, 100%. It goes not only in every roster you build, but every single squad that you're building. You'd have to have a pretty good reason to not take this card, I think. Minimum of 3, maximum of, 4, potentially even 5 if you are running Storm. Free attacks, not free, but for the cost of 1, is super powerful in the
Yeah,
game.
and I mean, all of those zero cost attacks are builders in some form or another. So effectively, the card is free,
Absolutely, yeah,
assuming
absolutely.
you do damage.
So we just spoke about Usurp the Throne. I think if you're taking Killmonger, that's an auto include, right?
Yeah,
So it
definitely
pretty much makes
every
it
time.
into all of the Wakandan rosters. So let's then have a look at the restricted cards. Now we've said it once, twice, I think, 3 times maybe. We'll say it again. Once you've looked at your affiliated cards, the next place you should be looking is your restricted cards, right? There's a reason they are restricted. They are considered to be the best cards in the game. So yeah, let's take a look at what we've got. So as we mentioned in our previous 2 videos, me and Quinn have made an assumption. There are currently 6 restricted cards in the game. They are Brace for Impact, Field Dressing, Doom Prophecy, Patch Up, and Med Pack. And also included in that list is All You've Got. Now, we believe that All You've Got is going to be banned. It's going to go into the banned list, and taking its place will be Bitter Rivals. So for the
Yep.
purposes of this video, that's the assumption that we are making, just so that in 6 months' time, if that is the case, it's going to be a more relevant list. But feel free to mix and match. I think, with maybe the exception of Doom Prophecy, Quinn, I don't mind any of these other 5 cards being used in the Wakandan roster.
They're all good in their own ways. Doom Prophecy, you have to have a very specific plan around, which a lot of affiliations either can't do or simply don't want to do because they have better things going for them. But yeah, any of these other ones, I think you can chop and change to suit your playstyle however you see.
Yeah, and I think it'll really depend, won't it, on who you're coming up against. If you know that you're against Magneto, for example, Brace for Impact is not a bad card to take with you.
All right.
You know, I prefer. I think we spoke about this, but I prefer Medpack to Patcher. I think it's a nicer card. You can play it on yourself
Yeah.
rather than only play it on somebody else. And field
Also,
dressing is always strong.
with Medpack, you also heal more for less power because
Yeah,
it's
2 for 3.
rather than it being X amount with patch up, X being a max of 5.
Yeah, and I think you're going to want to be able to spend. Power generation isn't a major issue with Wakanda, but you've got lots of things to spend that power on, haven't you? So, yeah, being able to get better return on investment is always good. Some non-affiliated cards then that can be used by anyone that I've put into the mix. I've put Sacrifice, Climbing Gear, Advanced R&D, and Escorts to Safety as potential ones. Advanced R&D, I think, is a super card for the Wakandans. You're going to generate a lot of power at some point, and the last thing you want is a character overloaded with power. You're better to distribute that out across the board.
So I think the thing with advanced R&D a lot of the time is if you're taking it, usually you want to be using it for some sort of turn 1 plan. Which I'm not sure Wakanda really wants to lean into that. I do think your reasoning behind it, behind its inclusion, with being able to distribute power and basically have one character give out a bunch of power, which is effectively at worst a free reroll for everyone else, isn't bad. But I think it depends a lot on what your slots end up looking like at the end of roster construction, and also what you're taking in your 5 for the game as well.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I also included Escort to Safety here, and one of the reasons for that is you can come up against some really big hitters, can't you? And we touched on it in our Avengers video where characters like Black Panther, who is going to be in the thick of it, right? He doesn't have any long range attacks. He's a a 2 range 2 on all of his attacks. I don't mind escort to safety if we're coming up against something like a Black Order or even a Brotherhood list where it's a very killy list. So you want Black Panther to be in to do his stuff, but then potentially use escort to safety to drag him out of the way and take him out of harm's way if he is targeted.
Yeah. Once again, it's one of those cards where it depends a lot on the final makeup of your roster, but it can be really nice, especially in certain matchups like, say, Black Order, where they have a lot of ways of mitigating any sort of anti-aggro control that you might have in the form of like Gwen or whoever else.
So, any other unaffiliated cards then, Quinn, that you would include in the mix?
I mean, I always give a shout for Disarm. I always think that worth running. It's just really good. Also, potentially, if you get forced onto sort of a split secure, or sort of one of those ones where you'll have sort of a duel, to use lack of a better term, on one side of the board between two characters where you're both vying for control. I think Blind Obsession is really good for that.
I do like Blind Obsession. I think, as we spoke about in one of the previous videos, with Bitter Rivals being made restricted, or we think is going to be made restricted, I do feel like Blind Obsession could replace that card in terms of the sort of aggressive attacking card.
Yeah, definitely.
More of a trade-off, I think. It feels a more balanced card, actually, doesn't it? Is that, yes, you get some really good bonuses, but if it's used in the wrong way, you're going to pay for it. And there are some restrictions to it as well. So, Quinn, on to the crisis cards. And once again, we're going to talk more broadly, aren't we, around the particular letters of the setups and the type of maps that we want to take on, rather than specific crises. But we may go into a couple of those. But what are you thinking for then, from a Wakanda perspective?
I mean, sort of the ancient wisdom of the game is that Wakanda really like E shapes, specifically gamma waves. Yeah, they're really good at control, and being narrowly focused as Knee is, as it's right down the middle of the board. It means that you sort of get to layer all of your defensive tech on top of itself, which just helps you build a bit of a bulwark whilst you're pushing your opponent backwards off of points. Just lets you score more quickly because certain points are worth more. Yeah, like it's just it is the go-to scenario for Wakanda a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, for me personally, I want to make sure that the secures that I'm playing are what I refer to as like traditional secures, where you have to be, you have to be contesting it, not an interact secure, because whilst yes, being able to push your opponent off makes it easier to then take that secure over, you really want to have those those victory points scored by being there and actually securing it yourself, don't you?
Yeah, I mean Wakanda. I think if Wakanda are forced into playing a flip secure, they're not super fussed about it. They don't mind, especially on Sword, because they're quite good at making low threat teams. It's not the best thing in the world, but they can manage. It's just not what they want to be actively trying to play, I don't think.
And then in terms of extracts, are we looking for? Well, in my mind, we're not looking for low scoring, are we? We're not gonna, if this game goes on into round 6, for example, against a team like a Black Order or a Cabal or even maybe an X Force, if they learn how to kill things one day, those low scoring VPs are not going to do us any good, really, are they? We want to rack up those VPs as early as we can in the game and as quickly as possible.
Yeah, Wakanda are a very fast faction in terms of how they want to score. So they want to be playing things like Struggle for the Cube or Spider Infected. Those two crises put down 5 tokens on the board, which if you can get potentially 3 of those in the first round with a cheeky Angela play, you're off to a good start. Especially if this has been picked into you rather than you picking it yourself, and you get to play Gamma as well. The combination of those two crises is insane. I've won games turn 2 quite regularly playing Gamma cubes. It's ludicrous.
Well, I think because of that control that you've got as well, you're pushing your opponent outside of range 2 of Gamma, and if so they're taking a damage from that, and if they're holding a cube, they're also taking a damage from that as
Yeah,
well.
and if it's the cube that happens to daze them, it means that they're losing that character for the entire round without a
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, guys, we're going to head over to TTS now and we will show you a quick roster that we've put together. Remember, this isn't going to cover every single scenario. This is a really good starting roster to work with that you can build out from. And feel free to swap and change any of the extra characters and cards that we put in there, but we'll center it around that core affiliation characters of Black Panther, Okoye, and Shuri. Killmonger thrown in for good measure. So, let's jump over and take a quick look. So guys, here is a quick Wakanda roster that me and Quinn have put together for us. So we'll go through the characters first. So we've got Angela, Black Panther, Enchantress, Ghost Spider, Killmonger, Medusa, Okoye, Shuri, Toad, and Valkyrie. We're going to take Gamma Wave, Infinity Formula, Sword, and then Spider Infected, Struggle for the Cube, and the Montesi Formula. Tactics cards, we're taking Blind Obsession, Brace for Impact, Climbing Gear, Disarm, Field Dressing, Sacrifice, Usurp the Throne, and Wakanda Forever. So, Quinn, we already know that the core in 99% of our squads is going to be these 3 at 9, isn't it? It's such a low threat level that it's really easy to keep that in almost every situation, isn't
Yeah,
it?
you can just slot so many different things in there. Like, it's absolutely absurd.
So the crisis that we want to play almost every time is going to be Gamma Wave, really, isn't it? That's the one that we're aiming for.
Yeah,
Who makes up then those extra 6 threat points?
so a lot of the time it tends to be 2-3 threats. The only 2-3 threats that we have being Gwen and Valkyrie. They bring a lot of dispersal to the team. You know, you've got Panther with his automatic pushes, you've got Shuri with her automatic pushes, you've got Gwen with superpower pushes, and you've got Valkyrie with a superpower throw. You just have so many characters to just sort of dominate the middle of the board and, you know, advance further to get onto that back point. An argument could be made for, you know, those 2-3s being a 2 and a 4. I think
Yep.
either Enchantress or Medusa alongside Toad could be really viable as well. It's usually just up to personal preference.
I really think it's going to depend, isn't it, on what the extract is. I think if you've got an extract that's a little wider, Toad is not a bad choice because he can probably get out there, pick up the asset, and get back within range 2, so not taking any damage. And then again, in that case, you can either take Enchantress or Medusa, depending on who you're coming up against. But
If you want
yeah,
to have a big fight, then, you know, Medusa's probably the one for that. If you want a control option or your opponent's going to be bringing a lot of mystic attacks, you probably want Enchantress just because she's got better defenses.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Quinn, I want to talk about now as well, and we haven't done this in the other videos, but Wakanda having so few affiliated characters, it really does open up the possibility, doesn't it, of having a dual affiliation, and really Wakanda being the second affiliation in a main roster. How do you find that? Do you think they play better as a single affiliation, or do you prefer to see them in a dual roster?
Yeah, I think very often we see them as sort of the secondary affiliation because it's only a 3 character investment, and all 3 of those characters are probably going to be good if you play them alongside any other affiliation. And also, they're quite light in terms of the number of tactic cards you need to devote to them. It's just a single card, usually, with
Yeah.
Wakanda Forever. Another one with Use Up the Throne if you're taking Killmonger. But yeah, they just slot into so many rosters so easily. All 3 of the characters have some overlap with other affiliations. You can very, very easily make an A Force team with that core. You know, you've got Okoye and Shuri who are, you know, dual affiliated with them. You've got Panther who's affiliated with Avengers as well. There are so many different options to how you build it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we could already see here that Air Force is, even with those 5 characters we've picked, we could actually be affiliated with A-Force
Yeah.
already. So it's a simple thing of taking out Black Panther and putting in She-Hulk instead, and there we go. I also don't mind Criminal Syndicate, because we've got
Yep.
Killmonger and we've got MODOK in the mix there as well. Again, a very control orientated faction, or affiliation at least. I also have seen them with Cabal. I think they can almost slip into almost any affiliation out there. They could, they can potentially fit into Guardians. You've got Storm. You could put into the mix as well, which means that they could be a dual affiliation with X-Men if you really wanted to.
Also Asgard as well. You've got 3
Yeah.
Asgardians in this roster anyway. Chuck in Thor and
Very easy to take out. I would say, Medusa from this lineup, or maybe Ghost Spider, but I think Medusa, and putting in Thor there as well. So lots and lots of options for the Wakandans. So within their own affiliation, quite restrictive, but I would highly suggest people go out there and look at what dual affiliation rosters there are as well. But if you want to stick with just the Wakandans, this is going to be a great entry point for you. Characters that are changeable, I would say. Angela could be replaced with MODOK, could be replaced with Scarlet Witch very, very easily. Medusa could be replaced with Vision, although if you're taking Vision, I would then say you probably don't want to take Enchantress as well. They fit. They sort of do the same job almost, don't they?
Yeah, they all sort of interchange quite easily.
Yeah. So guys, let me know down in the comments section below if you like this roster. Please leave a like if you like this sort of video. It really, really does help out. And let us know if you've had any success with the Wakandans. As we mentioned, they were one of the most powerful affiliations in the game, at least up until Season 5 of the TTS League. It'll be really interesting to see how much play they get going into Season 6, and also how many Wakanda factions make the cut-off. Quinn, anything else from yourself to add with regards to Wakanda?
Don't forget your rerolls. That's about it.
Don't forget your rerolls, absolutely. Guys, remember we've got our competition running for the month of September, so make sure that you leave a comment on this or any other video for the month of September, and you could be with a chance to win a brand new character pack. Leaves me with just enough time to say stay well, keep safe, and until next time, bye for now.
See you.